Tracy Brown here from What Is Mine to Do, ready to go live. Oh my goodness. And this topic, what's your alternative worldview? I don't know. I guess we could talk about that anytime. And today it seems especially appropriate on the eve of a major election in the United States of America. And really every election is a major and important election, whether it is for your local school board or whether it is for the president, vice president for the entire country, and whatever country or nation you live in, right? Every election is major, is important. And for millions of people, this particular election seems to have much higher stakes than they're used to, than we all are used to. So we're living in a time that requires an alternative world view. What do I mean by that? When we're preparing for any change, we need to have a view of what we are changing to or what we are changing for. And related to that, in my opinion, you also have to think about what am I willing to do to make this alternative world a reality. So I love the John O'Neill quote. You throw an anchor into the future you want to build, and then you pull yourself along by the chain. Repeating, you throw an anchor into the future you want to build, and then you pull yourself along toward that chain. So the question today is, what is your alternative worldview? You may have already voted in the early voting process in your state if you're in the US, or you may not be in the US and you still have an alternative worldview. What is it that you want the world to look like? Some of you are familiar with the Break the Silence challenge that I periodically lead. And when we're in the 5-day process of the Break the Silence challenge, on one of the days, I really challenge participants to think about what you expect the world to be like when racism ends, right? The what is mine to do to interrupt or end race-based hatred or violence. It sounds great. But if all you're doing is fighting racism, what's going to exist if you quote unquote win the fight? And I am amazed at how many people have never really thought about that. Well, racism is bad. We need to end it. That is true. Well, racism is unfair, and I want everybody to be treated fairly. Great. But what does the world look like? What then would day-to-day activities be like? What would the experience be? What would be happening? How would people be engaging with one another? What would we see as people go to the grocery store, report to their jobs, or start a new business? What does it look like? So shifting the focus from only fighting racism to forming what? A better world. Well, that's great, but then everybody is imagining something different and it's very abstract. So the question, what is your alternative worldview, is a really serious question that cannot be answered blithely. It cannot be answered with a cliche. It really requires you to think about, what would I be doing? What would be happening in the places I go? How would people be showing up? That's the alternative worldview that I am imagine, or that I am calling for, or if we use the John O'Neill quote, that's the alternative world that I am dropping my anchor in for the future. And in that quote, right, the end of the quote, John O'Neill says, and then you pull yourself along by the chain. You take action. You don't throw the anchor and then walk away. You don't plant an anchor and then say, okay, well, that's done. There's nothing else for me to do. To actually get to that future point, you have to take action, pull by pull, step by step, to reach the place you have anchored within or anchored to. So it's logical to then ask the question, what are you willing to do in order to make this alternative world a reality? Now, when I think about this, I get a little scared, really, because there's an alarmingly large group of people who are very, very, very clear about their alternative worldview. Instead of the world we even live in right now that is multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-generational, their alternative worldview includes all or mostly all white people, with only Black and brown people who agree with or affirm their superiority. There are millions of people whose alternative worldview is to eliminate or turn back, to eliminate the laws that we have now and return to laws and social ways of being that existed 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And what are they willing to do in order to create or bring their alternative worldview to reality? In the What Is Mine to Do site, we always say, well, we want to end race-based hatred and violence. And that's noble. But what are we willing to do? The people who are willing to and who see an alternative worldview where race-based policies and race-based hatred and race-based violence are just fine, they're willing to do a lot. They're willing to build a wall. They're willing to ignore laws. They're willing to change laws. They're willing to block cross-cultural education. They are willing to form a militia. They are willing to kill people who don't look like them or don't ascribe to their beliefs. So what are you willing to do? Are you willing to educate yourself? Are you willing to be a role model? Are you willing to, I don't know, are you willing to pray? Are you willing to vote? Great. Are you willing to be attacked by dogs? Are you willing to have the fire hoses held on you because you were standing up for something greater? Are you willing to have your child or your grandchild be killed in a church bombing or a church shooting? Are you willing to be estranged from family members or people you've been friends with since high school? Are you willing to learn self-defense techniques? Are you willing to go to jail? Are you willing to speak up or to speak out on a regional or local level? Are you willing to stop racial slurs when they come out of someone's mouth who is standing within 10 feet of you? Are you willing to ensure that microaggressions in your local school system are ended? Are you willing to stand up for people who don't look like you, or do you expect that only people who are directly targeted for these behaviors must stand up for themselves? Whatever you're willing to do, it's your list. But my question to you is, are the things you are willing to do going to change the systemic nature of race-based hatred and violence. Ending race-based hatred and violence is way more than just positive thinking. It is way more than simply praying for love to prevail. Those things are important. Ending race-based hatred and violence is more than a single vote on a single day. Important, critical even, but it takes more than that. Dismantling race-based hatred and violence is impossible to do without interrupting systems, without changing laws, without redefining what is socially acceptable behavior, without creating accountability. So back to the John O'Neill quote, you throw an anchor into the future you want to build, and then you pull yourself along the chain. What is Mine to Do is a place where you can come every day to remind you that you must do something. You must be the change you want to see. You must be the example. My name is Tracy Brown. Thanks for being a part of the What Is Mine to Do family. And thanks more for taking positive, proactive, courageous action.